Hey friends, welcome back to my garden. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every Tuesday, and I do vlogs on Fridays. If that's the sort of content you're into, I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. So on this day that I filmed this, the weather was glorious. The high that day was like 72 degrees with like no humidity. So I decided since I had some handy helpers for the garden, we were going to go ahead and whip this thing into shape. If you've been here for some time, you know that towards the end of the tomato season, everything kind of became a chaos garden. The weeds have taken over, things have died. Some things are still doing really well, but I really needed to kind of handle some things that had just been put on the back burner because of the heat. I'm starting with my dill here that clearly went to seed. Now, I could save that dill seed, but I decided to just sprinkle it around the pots to see if it would come back next year, because who doesn't love a good volunteer? Then it was on to my green bean bed. Now, I'm not ripping these out, I'm just cutting them off at the bottom to leave the root systems. Green bean plants and bean plants in general have a lot of really good nitrogen to add back to the soil. So I would like to leave, as much of that good stuff in the soil as possible. But I'm going to cut the diseased parts of the plants off, and I'm not composting them. I'm going to burn them. I don't want to add disease into my compost for next year. And this round of green beans did really well. These were planted in the spring. I got several flushes of green beans with minimal pests. Most pests I get here are bean beetles and grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are more of a late season pest. So as you'll see towards the end of the video, I did plant some more green beans on this day. So I really have to keep a close eye on them as they come up, because where I live in Zone 7A in Western Kentucky, we have these really big grasshoppers, and they can do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time. So I let the cats in every so often because they really appreciate the little grasshopper treats that they find around the garden. So you'll see here I got the bed all cleaned out, all the dead plants pulled out, and I moved on to my tomatillos. I was really torn here because my tomatillos actually did start to put on another flush of fruit, but I had my mind set on using this bed for something else, and I have many bags of frozen tomatillos from this summer, so I decided, well, it was okay to kind of say goodbye to these plants, rather than wait and see if they were going to develop any mature fruit. After the tomatillos, I moved on to the tomatoes. I grew determinate tomatoes this year. Everything came ripe pretty much all about the same time, and then the plants succumbed to disease. So just like with the green beans, I'm going to just pull these up and I'm going to burn them. I don't want to compost diseased plants, which could cause me problems in the future. I learned a lot from the tomatoes this year. This was the first time I've ever attempted to actually grow tomatoes in my big garden. And I did not successfully trellis them up. I just, it got so hot, I just couldn't keep up with the heat. So I just let my tomatoes do what tomatoes do and sprawl across the ground. And I did get a lot of tomatoes with minimal pest pressure. However, that being said, now that I am ripping the plants out and cutting them out, I do see that there is a lot of weeds that were hiding up underneath my tomatoes. So since every gardening season is, a season of learning, I decided next year I'm going to properly trellis my tomatoes and I'm going to grow indeterminates. And speaking of learning lessons, I grew these spoon tomatoes because I thought, oh, they're just so cute and adorable, and they're a patio variety and they won't get very big. But you can see here that that was in fact not true. They took over the whole end of my garden. They were very tedious to pick. They didn't taste that great, in my opinion. I mean, they're cute, but other than that, I don't think I'll ever be growing these on purpose again. And I wanted to show you this crabgrass. This is the primary weed that we get here in this area. And it has a really long root system. And if you miss just one little segment of this root, it will grow back. And I mean, it's just impossible to fight with it. This long root is all attached to one plant. So if it gets its nails into your garden bed, you're going to be fighting it forever. And the other bed in my garden where I grew my cabbages is just completely overtaken by this crabgrass. So it is a work in progress. And I believe that I'm going to get as many of the weeds out of it as I can. And then I'm probably going to tarp it over for the winter. And then next year I'll just garden through plastic, like the same kind of plastic I have laid down in my walkways. It's not ideal, but at least for one season so that I can get control of the weeds that just got out of hand. So this back bed that had the tomatoes in it, after we got it all weeded, we topped it off with some fresh soil, and now I am adding some bone meal. I also added some multi-purpose fertilizer, and all I'm going to do is just kind of loosely rake this in before I plant my green beans in this bed. Because we live in zone 7A, we have a really long growing season, and I'm told that I have plenty of time to grow another batch of green beans, so we're going to see. Now, I did go ahead and do the exact same thing to the bed that had the green beans in it. I put down some fertilizer and some bone meal, and then we topped this bed off with soil. And I went around and pretty much did this to all the empty beds, just trying to get them prepared for whatever I was going to plant next. I did run out of my multi-purpose fertilizer, so the beds that didn't get the regular fertilizer did get some blood meal also. I'm about to show you one of the garden kitties. I don't know that I got a very good shot, but this is him laying in that bed that's been taken over by the crabgrass. Not cool. So this is the soil that I'm using. It's the same thing I used in the spring, and I learned very quickly that it does need to be amended. It's good soil, but it doesn't, even though it says that it has extended release fertilizers in it, everything had to be heavily fed in the spring when it first started to come up. Everything was suffering. It was yellow and it was just nutritionally depleted. So I learned really quick, just make sure that you're putting some additional stuff in the soil that you buy if you buy cheap soil. Not a big deal. This soil was all on sale basically for like half off in the spring. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but I got a whole bunch of bags of soil for like half of what I would normally pay for it. They were like $1.99 a bag or something. And I bought extra because I knew that mostly my felt bags would have a lot of settling, and they do. So I knew that when I got ready to plant in the fall, even though I filled all of these bags all the way to the top in the spring, they would not be at the top when it was time to replant. So I had plenty, since I bought so many bags, to go ahead and top off all the beds and make sure that they were nice and full and ready for their new plants. Truth be told, I think I still have like 4 bags of it left, which will be perfect for topping up that metal raised bed in the center of my garden after the okra is all done this season. But while we were doing this, topping off the beds, I had my oldest daughter working on that bed that I had my cabbages in that's pretty much been overtaken by the crabgrass. And she did make some headway with it, but it had all gone to seed, which is part of the reason I decided that next year I'm going to be covering that with plastic. Because no matter how hard you try, you cannot keep all of that seed out of that bed when you're pulling those weeds. It just falls right off into the soil. So even with the plastic, crabgrass is very aggressive. I may end up having to just put cardboard down and silage tarp or something just until everything has died. I don't know. We'll have to work that out next spring. I don't really have a perfect plan yet, but we'll figure it out as we go. My daughter actually ended up having to sweep right here. All of the stuff that you see her sweeping that looks like sawdust is actually grass seed. So we just swept it all up and threw it over the fence into the yard where I don't mind the crabgrass. I just don't want it in my garden. I'm super thankful for all the help that my kids and my husband gave me on this day because I couldn't have gotten as much done as I did without their help. And the weather was definitely nice. So now, after we've got everything all tidied up, I get to actually start planting. So I'm going to put some sugar snap peas in here, one per corner, and then I have this little trellis thing in the middle. It's a little tower that they can climb up when they sprout. I did sugar snap peas in the spring, but I think I got a late start on them and it got too hot for them too fast and they just kind of dried up. I mean, I got some, but not the amount that I really wanted. I wanted to be able to harvest enough that I could blanch and freeze them for the winter. So I'm doing 4 plants on this side and I'm doing 4 plants on the other side of the garden as well. And hopefully the weather stays, kind of nice and it doesn't fry them as soon as they come up out of the ground. Our weather's pretty unpredictable and it has been unseasonably cool, but I do know that this next week it is supposed to be dry and our temperatures are supposed to get back up into the 90s. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And I have plenty of seeds, so if need be, I can always stick some more in the ground if it doesn't pan out. Now, I'm going to attempt yellow squash and zucchini again. The squash bugs were absolutely atrocious over the summer. They destroyed all of my plants. I got one zucchini and one squash out of my garden, and I probably had, I don't know, 8 or 9 plants. So it was unreal. Just gobs and gobs of squash bugs. So I'm going to do 4 yellow squash, 1 per pot. And if they don't germinate, I'll come back later and stick another seed in. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the zucchini. I'm planting Black Beauty zucchini again. I'm going to do 4 of them, 1 per pot. And my hopes are that because we're coming towards the end of the summer, that maybe the squash bugs have kind of like reached the end of their life cycle and moved on. I have seen leaf-footed insects in my garden on my cucumbers, but I haven't seen any squash bugs anywhere. So, I know that squash bugs will eat on other things. I have watermelon planted. I haven't seen them over there. So maybe, cross your fingers, we're done with the squash bugs. And then in this last bed here, this big one at the back, I'm going to plant bush beans. I had, like I said, a really good harvest off of the round of plants that I did in the spring. And so this bed is like going to be about twice as many. And I'm really hoping that the summer will, keep mild temperatures long enough that these green beans will come up and I can at least get 1 or 2 harvests off of them for canning and preserving. That would make me really happy. So I just put these all about, 2 or 3 inches apart and covered them lightly with soil. And then I came back with the hose and gave everything that I planted a good water, everything that was still alive a good water. It has been dry. It's going to keep being dry here, and I want to try to give these seeds the best start I possibly can. So I'm going to go down the list, my little mental checklist here of things that are actually still alive and thriving here in the garden. The okra in the center bed is just taking off. Like, I can't even tell you how many okra is on it currently. I probably should have gone out today and harvested, but I'll get to that tomorrow. Some of my flowers are still doing really well. The snapdragons and the straw flowers and the calendula, they're all still hanging out. They're getting a little leggy and a little long, but that's okay. They're still pretty. My rosemary and my oregano are still doing okay. I just cut them back really short. I gifted some of that to a friend, so I cut the plants down nice and short. They may or may not come back this late in the season. I don't know, but that's fine. I've harvested a ton of it to dry, and I'm not bothered if it dies. My basil down at the other end is doing okay. It's starting to show some signs of disease. So, I may get 1 more harvest off of it before it has to just be done. Sunflowers are starting to open. I can't remember what variety it was that I planted, but all of them, some of them are taller than I am, and they're all getting ready to open their buds. So that's really nice. Cucamelons and cucumbers are still going strong. My banana peppers are still going strong. In fact, right there to the left in that bagged pot on the end, you can actually see a hot banana pepper plant that was buried under that spoon tomato plant. I can't even begin to understand how that it grew without getting any sun underneath that spoon tomato, but it did, and it actually gave me some banana peppers. So I just went ahead. It was a little weak, so I stood it up with a trellis, and hopefully it doesn't, get sunburned really bad, and it survives. If not, honestly, I had kind of forgot about it, that it was even there. So you do what you can. But looking back now at all of the work we got done, there was progress made on this weedy bed, and everything else just looks absolutely amazing. Totally different garden space with everything cleaned up. I'm really excited about fall stuff. I'm crossing my fingers that everything that I planted comes up, and if not, I still have plenty of time to try to plant some more. But it was just amazing how much we could get done in one afternoon where the weather wasn't just scorching hot. And I'll say that my garden is a direct reflection of how I'm feeling. And after getting all this cleanup, I'm feeling much, much better. So that's all I have for you this week, friends. Until next time, happy gardening.